Coffee was discovered in Ethiopia by a goat herder in 580 AD. He tried what his frisky goats were munching on, a red berry from the Arabica shrub. It made him happy, as legend would have it. Arabs are generally believed to be the first to brew coffee. In 1543, Kher Beg, governor of Mecca, banned coffee. The Sultan of Cairo loved coffee and therefore reversed the law and executed Kher Beg. The first coffee house opened in Istanbul in 1554. Circa 1500, the Grand Vizier Kupril of Constantinople closed the coffee houses, and anyone caught drinking coffee was soundly castigated. On your second offense, you were executed by drowning. This started the first coffee boom. Coffee was first known in Europe as Arabian wine. In 1635, the first coffee house in Italy opened. Classification of the coffee plant is very hard, as there are many different types of species, varieties, and strains. The two main strains that commercial coffee comes from is Arabica and Robusta. At DiBella Coffee, we use 100% A-grade Arabica. Coffee generally grows best close to the equator between the tropics of Cancer and Capricorn, but they all differ enormously in appearance, variety, and characteristics. Coffee trees start from a sprout planted in shallow, sandy soil. The sprout is then pushed out of the soil after 2 days and grows 2 small leaves at the top of the sprout. For the first year, it is tended carefully and is slowly introduced to open weather as the nursery roof is gradually removed. At the most, a few hours each day is all the sun that the plant will want. This is why it grows best on mountainsides. For several years, the plant will not produce any fruit, although it will require constant irrigation, pruning, weeding, fertilization, and lots of tender love and care. After 4 to 5 years, the plant will bear its first crop, and after a few more years, it will reach its productive peak and will yield fruit for 20 to 25 years. The coffee plant produces creamy white flowers that produce a fragrance reminiscent of jasmine. The flowers then fall off after 2 days and are replaced by green berries. These berries take 7 months to become ripe and ready for picking. Arabica is the oldest known species of coffee. It is best grown on volcanic slopes at 1,000 to 2,000 meters high. It needs an annual rainfall of 150 to 200 centimeters and an average temperature of 15 to 24 degrees Celsius. In 1 year, an Arabica plant will produce 5 kilograms of fruit, which when roasted yields only 1 kilogram of roasted coffee. Arabica coffee accounts for 70% of the world's coffee, but is harder to grow as it is more susceptible to disease, pests, and frost. Therefore, it is more expensive. When the berries ripen, they must be picked almost immediately. Most A-grade Arabica is still hand-picked. The coffee fruit looks like a cherry. It is similar in color and size to a cherry, and each cherry contains 2 beans. Beneath the cherry is the pulp, a sweet, sticky yellow substance which becomes a slimy mucilage closer to the beans. The beans are encased in a tough, creamy white-colored jacket called parchment. After harvesting, the next step is the removal of the rest of the pulp from the beans. This is done by either a wet process or dry. Most A-grade Arabica is done by the wet process. Immediately the beans are washed in big tanks where the water then leads them through a series of channels. The rushing water helps to loosen the outer skin of the beans as they move towards a depulping machine. They then arrive in a fermentation tank where the beans will soak for 36 hours. The beans will then be removed and left out on raised mesh levels or patios to dry in the sun. They are constantly turned and raked for 1 to 2 weeks. If the beans still do not lose their moisture, they are put into a machine which will take the moisture levels down to about 11 to 12%. Before the beans are to be exported, they leave the farm and go to a curing mill, where the parchment will be removed by hulling. There are varying degrees of roasting. Light brown to cinnamon color, low body and light acidity. The beans are dry. This roast is too light and does not allow the coffee to develop to its full potential. Medium light brown color. The acidity brightens and body increases slightly. The bean is still dry. Medium, a medium brown color. The acidity continues to increase and the body becomes more potent. The bean is mostly dry. Medium dark, a rich brown color. Very small droplets of oil appear on the surface. The acidity is slowly diminished and body is most potent. This is the ideal roast for a well-blended espresso. Dark, a deep brownish black color. The bean has spots of oil or is completely oily. Subtle nuances are diminished. Flavor decreases while body dominates. Very dark, a black surface covered with oil. All subtle nuances are gone, aroma is minor, and body is thin. This roast is characteristic of American espresso. There are three main characteristics of coffee: acidity, body, and bitterness. Acidity is the bright and dry taste that adds life to a coffee. Acidity is unmistakable in most Kenyan coffees and should be evident in any wet processed coffees. Perceived acidity does not necessarily correlate to the pH of a coffee, but is believed to be the result of the acids present in coffee. Acidity is akin to the dry but bright sensation experienced on the backsides of your tongue while drinking a red wine. Dry processed coffees will have a low-toned and subtle acidity. It is important to note that as the roast develops, acidity decreases. Acidity is not a favorable quality in high amounts in espresso. For this reason, most American roasters will roast espresso very darkly. Unfortunately, at darker roasts, the aroma and sweetness diminish, which is equally detrimental to the espresso. Body is the weight of the coffee that can be best sensed by allowing the coffee to rest on the tongue and by rubbing the tongue against the roof of the mouth. Body ranges from thin to light to heavy, and as a result of the fat content. The viscosity, however, results from proteins and fibers in the brew. Medium and dark roast styles will have a heavier body than lighter roasted coffees, but conversely will have less acidity. Bitterness is a harsh taste primarily perceived at the back of the tongue. It is often caused by burning of the coffee grinds or influenced by a very dark roast. Generally not a desirable taste in Australia, it is probably the most common known term to describe coffee and is often confused with the sharpness of some blends. There are four well-known brewing methods: Turkish brewing, espresso, drip brewing, and plunger brewing. Turkish brewing. This is the most popular method for drinking coffee all over the Middle East, Greece, and Turkey. A form of coffee infusion, this method uses a long-handled, narrow-necked device called an ibrit, where very fine, powdery coffee grounds are placed with sugar and water. Put on the heat to boil, the liquid inside begins to rise and a dark foam will come through the small opening of the ibrit. Your coffee is done and should be poured into demitasse cups immediately along with the very desirable foam. Espresso. There are two different types of espresso makers: the stovetop model and the household electric countertop model. The latter resembles the large espresso makers seen in all coffee houses. They force hot water through grounds directly into your waiting demitasse cup. The nice added feature of most of these countertop machines is that you can make steamed milk for cappuccino and latte. Stovetop models have two chambers. The chamber on the bottom forces hot water through a filter that holds your coffee grounds into the upper serving chamber. The espresso brewing method requires a fine grind. Drip brewing. The drip brew method generally consists of pouring 90.6 degrees Celsius to 96.1 degrees Celsius water through a bed of coffee grounds held in a filter basket or cone. The water flows through the grounds continuously during the brew cycle, forced only by gravity. Filter brewed coffee is usually passed through a paper filter. This has a significant effect on flavor. Some flavor components will not pass through the filter as readily as others. Paper filters also do a good job of holding back the smallest particles in coffee grounds, the dust. These factors make for a cleaner, brighter flavor, or, as advocates of other brew methods might argue, they rob the brew of some of its richness. The drip brewing method requires a medium grind. Plunger brewing. The way a plunger works is really simple. Just put the recommended amount of ground coffee in the glass pot. Use a coarse to very coarse grind, similar to very coarse sand or raw sugar. Then pour in water that is not quite boiling, about 90 degrees C, and place the lid with the push-down filter on top. Next, slowly press down on the filter rod, pushing the grounds to the bottom of the pot. Using a coarse grind makes this easier. Once the coffee is pushed to the bottom, it's ready to serve. There are 5 fundamentals for making the perfect cup of coffee. The first of which, of course, is to begin with debella coffee. Then, the preparation of the work area, setting the grinder, filling the group basket, frothing milk, and cleaning your machine. Follow the guidelines for each of these, and you're sure to produce the perfect coffee every time. Light, air, and temperature are the 3 key elements that affect the quality of coffee during storage. Coffee should be kept away from natural light in an airtight container at a cool, consistent temperature, 2 to 8 degrees Celsius. Therefore, the fridge is the best possible place to store your coffee. When coffee is not kept under these circumstances, the coffee releases the oils contained in the beans at a dramatic rate, causing the coffee to lose a lot of flavor when brewed. This is also why coffee should be served when it's 48 hours to 2 weeks old, as the older the coffee gets, even if stored correctly, the more oil it will release. Remember, fresh is always best.